Hello everyone, my name is Anna and today I want to talk a little bit about Stephen King, who is my favorite author and it's commonly known as the King of Horror, which I think it's a very well-deserved title because he's one of the most influential and prolific writers of our time. I'm sure that you probably heard something about Stephen King at least once in your life. Even if you haven't read any of his books, you probably saw one of his books at your nearest library, or probably you watched a movie that was based on one of his books. Because right now he has more than 65 novels, and many of them have been adapted into films, TV series, and even comic books. But I want to start talking about his career. His career started with a novel named Carrie in 1974. This book has a really interesting story because Stephen wrote since a very young age. He sent these short stories to some magazines. Most of them were not published, but he didn't give up until Carrie. He didn't want to finish this book and threw the manuscript to the trash. And his wife, and I know you won't see this, of course, but Tabitha King, thank you so much for doing this. Because his wife picked up the manuscript from the trash and told Stephen, like, hey, you know what? I read this manuscript and I think it's a really great story. I think you should finish it. And well, Stephen did that, finished the story, and as they say, the rest is history. This first book, this first novel, set his signature writing style for all the books that he will do in the future. And I want to talk about the signature writing style that he has because he uses some interesting narrative devices. The first narrative device that I would like to mention is something that is called foreshadowing. This means that he gives subtle hints about what will happen later in the story, and this is used to build suspense. And I think it's great as a reader because you're trying to think, okay, based on this, I think the book will end in this way. And sometimes you're right, but sometimes it's something completely opposite, and yes, it's very interesting. Try to guess the plot of the book. Other narrative device that he uses is something that is called cliffhanger. This means that he ends a segment of the story with a dramatic question. So as a reader, you feel the need to keep reading and keep reading and keep reading just to know what is happening. But I'm going to be honest with you. Many of his books ends with a cliffhanger, with an unresolved problematic, and I don't really enjoy this. This is like your personal opinion because I know some people like this, but myself, I don't like when the story ends with something unresolved. I think it's very frustrating, at least for me, but it's part of his style and I respect that. Also, I would like to mention that he has an immersive storytelling. And this is because he's very descriptive. He is very descriptive with the characters and with the scenarios and with everything. And that's why his books are so long. And something that I think it's very characteristic of his signature writing style is that he uses a mix of realistic elements with supernatural elements and psychological elements. As I told you, he is known as the king of horror, so of course he writes horror books, and of course he uses a lot of ghosts, of monsters, of demons, vampires, everything that you can imagine. Probably he has a book about that. But he also uses human feelings. He uses fear, guilt, grief, passion, and even addictions, which I think it's something very kind of special, because probably you didn't know this if you're not a big fan of this author, but he had some issues with illegal substances and alcoholism at one point of his life. So I don't know, I think when he writes about illegal substances or alcohol, you can connect with the character, of course, but you can also connect with the author, and I think this is something a little bit difficult to do, because as a reader sometimes you can connect with the character that you're reading, but not with the author that much. And yeah, something that I want to mention to you is his writing routine, because it's very disciplined. He writes about 10 pages per day, and that's why he gets to publish 2 books per year. I think that is awesome, and it's something that I admire. And just to finish this video, I want to recommend you some of his books. The first one is It. It's the first book that I ever read. I was 14 years old, I guess. I wouldn't recommend you to do that if you're that young, because this book has very bloody and violent scenes and adult only scenes. I don't like to say the S word due to the YouTube policies, but I think you know what I mean. It's great. This book uses a narrative device that is called Flashfoward, because you start the book on 1957 and then you jump until 1984, and then you jump back to the 57, and there's a lot of jumps in time, and it's really interesting. The second book is The Mystery of Salem's Lot. I have the Spanish version right here. I read this book a few months ago because HBO Max released a cinematographic adaptation of this book. In this, I want to do a short spoiler. This book is about vampires, and to be honest with you, I've read like 15 books of Stephen along my life. But this is the first one that got to scare me. So it's great, and it's not too long. And the last one, last but not least, The Shining. I also have the Spanish version right here. And probably you watched the movie. If I'm not wrong, this is a movie that was made by Stanley Kubrick, I guess. So I'm not going to talk about a lot about the plot, but in this book he uses, as I told you, the alcohol issue. He uses alcoholism for one of the characters in this book. So I think it's very deep, and you can really connect with the author. You can feel what he went through at some point of his life. And yes, that's it. That was all about Stephen King. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you get to buy any of his books. I have some other books right here. They are a lot, but I don't have that much time. And if you read one of his books, I would be very, very happy.